We've given Joe Biden a little bit of credit for what he's pushed for in this COVID relief bill, but it ain't passed yet. And suddenly it's starting to look even worse than it did last week. Here he is on the inclusion of the hike to a $15 an hour minimum wage.
You also want to raise the minimum wage to $15. Is that something you would be willing to negotiate on in order to get Republican support?
Well, apparently that's not going to occur because of the rules of the United States Senate.
So you're saying the minimum wage won't be in this?
My guess is it will not be in it, but I do think that we should have a minimum wage stand by itself, $15 an hour, and work your way up to the 15. It doesn't have to be boom. And all the economics show if you do that, the whole economy rises. I'm prepared as President of the United States on a separate negotiation on minimum wage to work my way up from what it is now, which is pain. Look, no one should work 40 hours a week and live below the poverty wage. And if you're making less than $15 an hour, you're living below the poverty wage.
But that may not be in your American Rescue Plan.
No, I put it in, but I don't think it's going to survive.
Okay, so after that interview, which was Biden's first sort of sit-down television interview, senior advisor to the president, Cedric Richmond, said Biden's comment on the increase not surviving, quote, was merely his prediction of what he thought the Senate would do, adding Bernie Sanders has assembled the team to make a very compelling argument that it should stay in the bill. We're gonna go to Bernie in a sec, but Francesca, what do you think about this seeming preemptive retreat by Biden on the hike of minimum wage?
It's interesting because in that clip you see two different Bidens, which is like the one sort of like, well, we can work our way up to it, and it's not gonna happen overnight. And it's kind of the politician's line that like whenever you're asked a question, you always sort of retreat from the like principle of what you stand for. And then he just goes into like, wait a minute, no one working 40 hours a week should live below the poverty line. Yeah, wait a minute, that's what I believe. And it's like, and that's a little bit of more like the grandpa Biden, the Biden who's like, peace, I'm out, like I'm gonna just walk away. You like, I wanna like be the FDR. Like I'm not trying to give him that much credit. I'm just trying to like see the moments where he actually just says what he believes. And then it's like, yeah, man, just say that. Just say people deserve $15 an hour now because they are living below the poverty line while working 40 hours a week. And $15 an hour really in a lot of places isn't even enough. So like, why not just stand by that? But then he hedges immediately, but I don't think it's gonna pass. Who cares? You don't even need to say that. Just say, this is what I believe, this is what I want to get done. End of story.
Yeah, and look, in terms of saying it now when we're not there yet, I maybe there's like a strategic element of, well, it's really looking like it's not gonna be possible, so I better start to make sure that people don't expect it, because if they go on expecting it for longer, then it doesn't happen, then they're gonna have a really negative response. Maybe, I mean, maybe think about that before you decide to include it in the first place. But I would also say, since we don't know yet, and it's still possible, maybe put some pressure, try to make it happen. Yeah. And it looks like it is possible. So we're gonna go to Bernie Sanders. Here he is talking about his continuing efforts behind the scenes to make sure that it is included and that it does pass.
We've got to raise that minimum wage to $15 an hour. And I can tell you, as chairman of the budget committee, we have a room full of lawyers working as hard as we can to make the case to the parliamentarian that in fact, raising the minimum wage will have significant budget implications and in fact, should be consistent with reconciliation rules.
During the campaign, you were running for president and you said whoever you picked as VP would overrule the parliamentarian in order to pass legislation such as Medicare for all with just 51 votes. Should Vice President Harris do that, overrule the parliamentarian to keep the minimum wage increase in this bill?
Well, before we get to what the vice president is going to do, I got to get through the parliamentarian, and then I got to get 50 votes in support of raising that minimum wage to $15.
Okay, so we got two bits there, Francesca. First of all, he has this team of lawyers, which instantly, for some reason, makes me think of the binders full of women, except that this one isn't misogynistic. But anyway, he's got people that are still working on it, so we don't know yet. So I would say project strength leading up to that. But then he didn't answer the question about whether Harris should overrule the parliamentarian. What did you think about that?
Well, I mean, then he answers it honestly, which, I mean, Jake Tapper's assuming that there's 50 votes on the Democratic side, and the truth is there's not. The sad truth is they still have to whip those votes and make sure that all Democrats are on the side of a $15 minimum wage, which seems like such a no-brainer for us progressives and people, on the left, but like, actually, there's the, Manchins and Kristen Cinemas and Hickenloopers and other folks who were like duped by, Joni Ernst in one of the first rounds of negotiations around the $1.9 trillion stimulus that where they were like, yeah, no, we shouldn't have it, and because they're worried about, I don't know what, small businesses that we keep touting out. So I think it's a little bit preemptive. I personally think if the votes are there, then yeah, Kamala should step in, but I don't know if they're there.
Yeah, and like it's depressing that you can get to the point where Joe Biden now talks about like the fact that so many people are effectively living beneath, I think he means the poverty line, but he keeps saying the poverty wage. But anyway, he now accepts it. He's talking as if he's Bernie Sanders, even though, I don't think you have to go back that many years before he wouldn't have supported this either. But you still have people like Manchin who are like, no, if it's 11 here in West Virginia, that's the highest it should be anywhere. Because I have to imagine no place is more expensive to live in than West Virginia. It's an insane position to hold. God, Joe Manchin. Anyway, but I guess in this, I want to ask the question, is he going to be the one Democrat to end the doubling of the minimum wage nationally? And yeah, he probably would be okay with it, even though it would be devastating economically, the moral cost of the damage to so many families, including in his own state. But then also strategically for the Democrats, not delivering on that after making it a big issue is going to be devastating too. He seems perfectly willing to be the Democrat that ensures that. I also want to just quickly say, if you rewatch the first part where Bernie is talking about the minimum wage and how it needs to be raised and all of that, I get that he does a lot of interviews and maybe he's just tired or whatever. I was yawning during the pre-show because the coffee had kicked in. Jake Tapper looked so bored listening to Bernie talk about how the minimum wage needs to be raised and how people are suffering. He looked like he didn't give a damn about any of this. And I get part of it is probably because I assume he really despises Bernie Sanders. Maybe it's less the topic and more the man delivering the message. Look at him.
I think he's listening.
It's like if somebody was if somebody was trying to talk to me about the Super Bowl right now. Be like, are you gonna stop talking
he's got resting elitist face though. Like he can't help it, He just has a little
Anyway. But we do have a little bit on Joe Manchin, something I was alluding to earlier. So here's that next bit.
Even if it makes it into the bill, you're going to need every Democrat on board. And West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin says he does not support increasing the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. He has suggested he could get behind a lower amount, such as $11 an hour, which I think is what the rate is in West Virginia. Would you be willing to compromise in order to get Manchin's vote?
Now, I strongly look, a $15 an hour minimum wage is not a radical idea. Making $600 a week in the United States of America, barely, given the high cost of rent and all the other living expenses that people have to pay, that's not a lot of money. So these are debates that we're going to have within the Democratic caucus. But I hope and believe that at the end of the day, the members of the Democratic caucus understand that we do need to pass a $15 an hour.
It's just, I get that this is sort of how it works, but like the idea that like Joe Manchin gets to decide if millions of minimum wage workers around the country get $4 extra an hour or not.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, and
it's
this
sad
is
that like most of them wouldn't even end up knowing that it was him that might cause that. Like every day they work, they are noticeably taking home less money, potentially specifically because Joe Manchin doesn't give a damn.
I mean, look, can we go to the other side? Is there a Republican who believes that we should raise the minimum wage? I mean, I believe in working. I think bipartisanship is important when it comes to like bread and butter issues like this. But then you see the ways that the negotiations and all the amendments that Republicans in the Senate introduced to try and scale back any way they could this $1.9 trillion, and the fact that they are, and it's like, if we could just run ads over and over and over again in these red states about these senators and how they tried to cut into the deserved support for the American people at a time of an international pandemic, massive unemployment, healthcare crisis. Like, just come on. I don't know. I don't know what will work. But yeah, I mean, it is ridiculous that it would come down just to one guy. And I think West Virginians, they've been trying. They really have been mounting a good amount of resistance. I know there's a lot of progressives and Democrats who are really trying to change that state. So
yeah, imagine if everything else was the same, but it was Paula Jean Swearengin instead. The conversation we'd be having about minimum wage. All these elections matter.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.